I think the first time I ever heard the word AIDS and knew anything about it was in 1984 when I seen a gentleman in a hospital bed on his last breath of air. He had just wasted away. And I remember him talking and he couldn't even hardly speak. And that's the only thing I ever remembered about it. I never thought I was going to have to be concerned or worried about this disease, so I paid very little attention. My son Ryan White was born in 1971 on December the 6th. He weighed 7 pounds 8 ounces and really skinny, but had the biggest feet. And he was circumcised. I didn't know anything about hemophilia at the time, but then they come back and said that, you know, they can't get him to stop bleeding. They put ointments and all kind of stitches and everything on him to try to get it to stop bleeding. Finally, they transferred him to Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis, and that's where the hematologist told me that Ryan was a severe hemophiliac with less than 1% clotting, and said it was very serious. He told me that he'd never be able to play contact sports and he'd never be able to have any surgeries. They said if he's ever in a car accident, the chances of him living will be 0. So as a mom, being first diagnosed, I was like a nervous wreck, and he said, now I want to tell you some good news. He said, we have this new drug that's not approved by the Food and Drug Administration yet, but with your permission, we'd like to give it to your son. He told me, he said, we feel like this drug will enable hemophiliacs to live almost a normal life. So I was like, oh my gosh, yes, you know, give him factor, you know. And they said, you know, it has to be given by IV. And I said, that's fine. You know, to be told that your son has a severe condition that most are crippled by the time they're 12 and don't have a long lifespan. I mean, I felt like this was a miracle drug for us. Factor VIII contains a clotting agent found in blood. They pour several pints of donated blood into a container. It's spun real fast and the clotting is sucked out. That clotting is used to treat hemophiliacs. For 2 years, when he was 3 years old, on Tuesdays and Fridays, we would go to the doctor and he'd get factor. And it made our life so wonderful. I mean, we just dealt with hemophilia. It wasn't an obstacle anymore. And then when he was 5, they asked me if I wanted to learn how to give factor. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's going to make our life even greater. So whenever he had a problem or a bleed, I would give him a factor. If Ryan had a joint bleed or something serious to where he needed an ACE bandage or crutches, you'd have to give factor VIII every day. You'd have to give it almost every day for maybe a week or 2 weeks for it to clearly heal up. But as a preventative measure, we gave factor VIII twice a week. The problems I think we dealt were mostly with knees, ankles, hip hemorrhages, elbow hemorrhages, and bruises all over his body, and being questioned by hospital staff. How did he get all those bruises? I think that's kind of common because, I mean, you'd never know how they got those bruises. They would just appear. I mean, Ryan was always had like 100 bruises all over him. In 1984, Ryan was very sick, very, very sick. He had to go to the doctor quite often, 4 or 5 times that year, because he had fevers and everything. And I got a message the 1st of December that said that Ryan had hepatitis, and I thought, well, that's why he's been so sick. But it was just a few days after that he got off the school bus and he come in the house and he said, Mom, you got to do something. He said, I can't even get off the school bus without being tired. Mom, I don't understand what's going on with me. And it was just a few days later, he couldn't hardly breathe. He started running high fevers. They put him in the hospital. He was diagnosed with pneumonia in both lungs. They treated him for bacterial pneumonia and he never got any better. Finally, they sent him by ambulance to Riley Hospital. Dr. Kleinman met me at the head of infectious disease at Riley Hospital. And he said, we feel like Ryan might have TB, cancer, or AIDS. And I mean, I knew nothing about AIDS, but I just assumed that it had to be cancer or something, not that I wanted him to have cancer. And they said they wanted to do a biopsy, and I said, well, Ryan's a severe hemophiliac. I said, he's not supposed to have any surgeries. And Dr. Kleinman told me, he said, this child's going to die if we can't find out what's wrong with him. So I signed the papers. Ryan went into surgery. There was no AIDS test at that time, so they sent the results to Denver, Colorado, where the results came back that he had pneumocystis, which said he had AIDS. When Ryan was diagnosed with AIDS, he was only 13 years old. We were told that he only had 3 to 6 months to live. He was diagnosed with AIDS on December 17th. So it was the day after Christmas. I really wasn't planning on it, but I said, Ryan, you know you've been really sick. He said, yes. I said, they say you have AIDS. He said, am I going to die? I said, Ryan, we're all going to die someday. We just don't know when. He goes, let's pretend I don't have it. I said, Ryan, we can't do that because we have to take these precautions to keep you from getting sick. My daughter, Andrea, she goes, Mom, that's not what he means. And Ryan said, see, Mom, she knows me better than you. He said, I don't want everybody that enters this room or to see me, that sees me to say, poor Ryan, he's dying. He said, I just want to go ahead and go on with my life, okay? I was so angry at Factor and everything about the whole process. And I asked Ryan, if you knew Factor had AIDS in it, would you still take it? He said, I would. He said, Mom, it kept me out of a lot of pain. And, you know, so as much as you have this hysteria about upset and mad about it, to ask the person themselves, because I don't think people can realize how bad that pain is. I would rub his knee just continuously as light, and you just couldn't do very hard at all, or else it would just, you know, he would scream out. So then he had 3 teachers that came down to visit him, and they brought cards and letters from his classmates, and I said, he will be so excited that you're here. And I said, all you have to do is put on these gown and gloves and you can go in and see him. And they kept saying, no, that's all right. I said, no, this is for his protection. And they said, no, we'll leave the cards and letters out here. And then you just start noticing everything. You start noticing the panic in everybody. I seen it very early on how people treated Ryan, like he's had to have done something bad or wrong or he wouldn't have got this disease. This is God's punishment on people who do bad things. And there's some funny things going on in that household. That's how he really got AIDS. And we can't let Ryan White in school or every gay person in the country is going to come to our town. And you saw the religious community especially not wanting to confront this disease. Even my own church, who I taught Sunday school for 10 years, 2 to 4-year-olds, and I'd been going there to this church my whole life. To see how the Christian community even reacted was just overwhelming to me. How when I thought my faith and my support team would always be my church, and to see that it was not there. I called the National Hemophilia Foundation because I knew how it had to affect all hemophiliacs. And I knew if Ryan was infected, we all got our factor from the same place, they all had to be infected. And their comment was, we're a Hemophilia Foundation, not an AIDS Foundation. And they said, I'm sorry, we cannot draw attention to our hemophiliacs having AIDS. One of the best things that happened when Ryan was in the hospital, Dr. Kleiman told me, he said, I know you're a strong Christian lady, but the people fighting this disease and trying to do something about it is the gay community. So he gave me the number of AMFAR. I called AMFAR, and that was the best thing I ever did, because on the other end of the line was a gentleman by the name of Terry Byrne. And Terry Byrne became my guardian angel. He said, we're finding out here in New York far sooner than anywhere else what works and what doesn't work. He said, believe me, he said, any time you have a question, you call me no matter what time of the day or night it is. So, and I did. I spent many hours talking to Terry. That was one of the best things, because it put us in communication to a lot of people that were fighting the disease too. Ryan got to where he looked so good, you wouldn't even tell he had AIDS. He kept calling me and about bugging to go to school, and he says, Mom, he said, call the school, see if I can go visit. They have pizza on Friday, and I really like the school's pizza. I called Mr. Colby, and Mr. Colby says that, call me back after spring break. I called back after spring break. He said, Ryan can't even come to visit school. He said, have you talked to the local Board of Health? And I said, the Board of Health? He said, yeah. He said, I think you better call them. There's people that's been wanting quarantine signs put on your door. He said, but you need to hear it from them. They're going to vote in July whether to allow Ryan in school for next year or not. He said, you know, just be patient until July. July came, the end of July came, we get a call from CBS Morning News. It went over the wires that the school board voted on the 15th not to let Ryan in school for next year. So that's when it just broke loose. The media, the chaos, I mean, we couldn't even answer the phone because the media, they were camped out at our doorstep, people wanting interviews with Ryan. None of it was kind of planned, but at the same time, I think Ryan thought he had a chance to explain and to try to educate people. First of all, we fought the school, the teachers, and the principal. They voted unanimously to keep Ryan out of the classroom. And then he fought the school parents and the school kids. So it became a long, long battle. I mean, we thought it would take one court hearing. We had all these medical experts on our side. We had the CDC and famous infectious disease doctors. And the first court hearing, we realized that was not going to take place. They had doctors testifying that they wouldn't let their kids go to school with Ryan, and they wouldn't treat Ryan if he'd been a patient of theirs. The fight to go to school really lasted for like a whole year after that. Ryan was finally able to go back to school, he thought, but the prejudice was still there. Kids would just, make fun of him. Kids would, you have AIDS, don't touch him, don't touch him. Ryan had a separate restroom. He ate off of disposable eating utensils and trays at school. These were concessions we made to kind of help maybe meet everybody halfway, but the prejudices was still there. So Ryan calls me from school, and I said, what's the matter? He said, when somebody's been in my locker. When I open my locker, my books and folders all have fag and other things in them, wrote on them. And I said, Ryan, give me the principal. And he said, Mom, he's not here. He said, they're at a meeting at another school. I said, give me the vice principal. He said, Mom, they're at a meeting at another school. I said, Ryan, there has to be somebody at that school. He said, Mom, there's a secretary here. I said, Ryan, give me the secretary. I told the secretary, I said, I've never called a press conference in my life, but I'm about to call my very first one. You have 5 minutes to get him a new locker, a new folder, or I'm going to have every media in the country at that school. And Ryan calls me back about 10 minutes later. He goes, Mom, everything is cool. He said, I got a new locker, I got new folders. He said, really, Mom, everything is okay. We moved to Cicero, Indiana, and that's when our whole lives completely changed. The first day we moved in, 5 kids stopped by the house to introduce themselves to Ryan. We didn't know this, but the student body president lived 3 doors down. And when she heard that we were moving into the neighborhood, she went to the school, the principal, and said, let's make Ryan White welcome here. Not the parents, it's the kids that got behind Ryan, and they went home and talked to their parents and said, I know how you get AIDS and how you don't, and I'm not going to get AIDS from Ryan White. I had 3 moms that stopped by and said, if you ever need anything. Our house in Kokomo was the AIDS house. I mean, nobody ever stopped by our house. Ryan, for the first time, he said, Mom, I feel like I've got people fighting this disease with me. He said, I'm not fighting this disease alone anymore. His whole life changed. He went to proms, he went to dances, he had a girlfriend. He had a job at Maui Skateboard Shop, and I can remember him coming home telling me he had a job at Maui Skateboard Shop. I said, well, how much are you getting paid? He said, $3.50 an hour. I said, that won't even hardly buy your gas to Indianapolis and back. He said, Mom, you don't get it. I got a job just like everybody else does. Ryan made a difference, I think, because of his honesty and that smile. He had a smile that made people listen. And I think he had honesty to tell the truth and to just try to educate people. A lot of kids made fun of him and said, you have to be gay or you wouldn't get this disease, So I think he saw how the gay community was being treated, and he didn't want anybody to be treated that way. The hemophilia community now, I see a split. I kind of see people that kind of don't want to be reminded all the time about all the deaths and all the bad things that happen with Factor. But I think at the same time, when you deny something, it makes it so it doesn't exist, and it did exist. This is a part of our heritage that within the hemophilia community, we have to honor and respect those that went through this horrible, horrible blood holocaust. I mean, that's exactly what it was. This was a whole community that was wiped out. That had moms and dads and families and aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters. Too many people were lost that we loved, and it affects people even still living today. I had this mother, I want to share this story because a mother called me and she said, I have to talk to you a minute. My husband and I, we fight all the time. We were trying to protect our little boy. He was like 5 or 6. He was a real young kid. She said, we fight over who knows and who doesn't know in our family. My little boy just starts screaming at us. Stop fighting. I know I have AIDS. I know I have what Ryan White has. And this woman was saying, I'm just so sorry we didn't do this sooner. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. Everybody thought they were doing the right thing, but we wouldn't come together. The hemophilia community, this was a disease that we were all sharing. We were fighting AIDS and hemophilia together, but it was separated. There was like a line drawn. I love seeing that joined now. I think we need to be one. We need to be and share our stories and be able to communicate with people the sadness and the sorrow, but also the joy that maybe nobody has to live with this again.